This is Heather Stephen, and you're listening to Pieces to Peace, Anchoring on the Other Side of Grief. This podcast focuses on people who have emerged from the depths of their grief, their transition from surviving the darkest of days to seeing the light again. Through my own experiences of grief, I have learned how healing it is to know that I am not alone. My hope is that those seeking comfort and relief will find some here and leave feeling reassured that there is life again. There are brighter days ahead, just around the corner. Hi, Toni.
Good morning.
I am so excited that you were willing to come on and share your sweet and tender, sacred story with us. We don't know each other very well. We were kind of like brought together by a mutual friend who I don't even know that well. The mutual friend, I know her sister. So it kind of like spread out a little bit. But I'm so grateful that you have been willing. And I don't even know the details really of your story. I just kind of know the gist. So I'm really looking forward to hearing everything from start to finish, you know, the worst of it until where you are today. So will you just kind of, introduce yourself and then, talk a little bit about where, like, just your family or your life and then go into your story?
I'm Toni Zufelt. I live in Boyd, Texas. We've lived here 24 years, and I've got 5 kids. I've got almost 5 grandbabies and animals, acres, chickens, garden, stuff like that.
Love that.
But that's just kind of what we do. Live a simple life. Grief and I are old companions. My grief journey started 20 years ago when my mom passed away. And that was my first funeral, my first everything. And I had little kids at the time. So that was the first time that I ever went through anything like that. And it was really hard, but it was just uncharted water for me. And I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know, how to deal with it. I didn't have the depth of the person I am or the faith that I have now. And so it was way different than the last griefs that I've gone through. But it also gave me some form of peace because my mom had passed away.
Right.
And that helped me because when my son did pass away, I know who greeted him. I knew who was there. So that helped me. That was one of those aha moments in the middle of the tragedy and the absolute devastation but I know who's there. My mom's there, and that's okay. And that gave me peace. And my kids helped me a lot through that. They loved me through that whole grief, really, and kept me going, gave me a purpose, gave me a reason, gave me the fortitude to keep going and not just give up. And that came back on my second grief story. Same thing. I mean, I guess they're just tougher because we went through the first one, I guess.
Right.
But the second one was 15 years later. I had 3 adult children. Dustin was 24, Kaylee was 21, Zane was 19, Shane was 17, and Quinn was 10. Dustin had spent 5 years in the Marine Corps. He was on a Special Forces unit for a year and a half. And he was deployed for 2 full deployments. He was gone for roughly about 2.5, almost 3 years before we got to see him. And during that time, I learned how to really, really co-parent with God. Because when he was on the Special Forces unit, I didn't know where he was. We had no contact. We had nothing. He was just out there. And he had to go back. And if they called, then he went. And so I got one phone call, or woke up one time. And it was 4:00 in the morning. And I heard Mom. And it was his voice, but he wasn't there. And I knew he wasn't there. As soon as I woke up, I knew he wasn't there, but I knew he was in trouble. And so I went and I knelt down and I started praying. And the first thing I said was, God, let him live. And I said, no, take that back. Let them all make it out. Let them all live. Let his 12-man unit come through this somehow, And I prayed for about an hour and a half. And I finally had peace, and I finally laid down. And when he came in months later, I asked him about that because it was August 13th. I asked him, where are you? What were you doing that it woke me up in the middle of the night?
Right.
And he never told me, but he knew what it was.
Right.
Like, he knew what it was. And I just learned how to really lean on Heavenly Father through that. And I learned that, you know what? My kids are mine, but they were his first. They're just loaned to me. And so when I'm not there, it's okay because he's got them. And if he needs my help, he'll let me know. And so when he got out of the Marine Corps, we were ecstatic. We really, really were.
Right.
Yeah. In 2018, he got out. He came home. He had his girlfriend. He lived with us for about 4 or 5 months. And then he moved out and got an apartment. He had a job working with for our old bishop. And his job took him out of town 2 weeks at a time. He got 2 weeks on and a week off. And that March, we decided to go to Arizona on spring break to visit my husband's family. All 4 of my kids went with me and my brand new grandbaby. She was 6 weeks old. Dustin opted to stay home and work. And March 13th, I got a phone call at 11:54 at night. And it was his friend that he worked with, and he told me that Dustin was gone. He had died. And he had had a motorcycle accident. And it took us a really long time to figure out actually what happened. But in the end, what happened was he had been playing pool and drinking at a little bar in the town that he was working in. And he had his crotch rocket. And he decided to ride that back to the hotel, which was literally not even like 3/4 of a mile away. And he clipped a curb. His girlfriend had come into town, and she was there with him, and she was driving her car. And after he wrecked, she hit him. And so it was a double whammy. Like it really was. And it was a lot of up in the air stuff because they wouldn't release details for a long time. And it took us about 6 months before we actually got the paperwork and the details and the witness statements and all that kind of thing before we knew what happened.
The details because it was like a criminal case at that point, or was it not?
Yeah, she got arrested for intoxicated vehicular manslaughter.
Okay.
But because he wrecked first, they couldn't say that her car was actually what caused his death. So it was named an accident, and it was undetermined whether it was her fault or his fault or whoever's fault.
Wow.
But it was a very frustrating process because
I can imagine.
we didn't know.
Yeah.
And after that, after we found out what happened and figured out what happened, there were a lot of blessings that came because there was a woman who was a surgical nurse. Her and her husband pulled out of a gas station just down the road when Dustin was driving up the road. And her husband noticed in his mirror that he had wrecked. He saw the light flip. So they turned around and was driving up the one way to him.
Oh, okay.
When she hit him. Like they knew what happened.
Right.
But she was there with him and she performed CPR with him. There was actually an ambulance at another gas station right in front of where he wrecked, who made it to him in minutes. What we found out from the autopsy is that there was no way they could have saved him. Like it was impossible. It was
Like
over
instant?
before it started at that point.
Okay.
It was his. It sounds bad, but facts make me feel better. So his heart was found underneath his right lung. Like it had severed. It had severed his 2 major blood vessels there.
Mhm.
And he had a whole bunch of things in his brain, his neck, his back. Like it was not going to happen. There was no
Right.
saving him. But the nurse lady, my daughter found her after we found her name on the report and everything. She found her on Facebook. and we sent her profuse thank you for being there with him.
Right. Yeah.
And she still reaches out at Christmas time and thinks about us. And, the sad thing to me is, well, the worst part for me is that if he had just wrecked his bike, for me, and this is just my opinion, the hospital was less than like 1,000 yards away. There was an EMT, an ambulance sitting at the gas station in front of where he wrecked. There were a lot of things that were put into play that could have saved him had he not got hit by the car, but that's my mom.
Right. Of course.
Idea.
Right.
But it brought me a little bit of comfort because it made me think, God did put him in a place to where he could have gotten help, but other people made really poor decisions, and you can't factor that out. Somebody else decided to eat something, and somebody else decided to drive drunk too. And so now 2 people made really bad decisions that night, and it ended up in my son's passing.
That bring you comfort. Like, tell more about that.
Just the fact that I felt like Heavenly Father knew that he was going to make a bad decision, and he was trying to come back to church, and he was trying to get his life in order, and he was working really hard at it. And had he just wrecked his motorcycle, it was a blessing twofold, because his bike separated from him, which never happens. And it went 100 and some yards down, like next to the highway, down the grass. And he went straight on the road, nothing impeding him, no cars, no nothing. But because we don't know what the car did, it's just that thing that I think about.
Right.
That, if it had just been him, and if it had just been him and his bike, the bike left him. He wasn't wrapped up in it. He went down the road. Yeah, he had road rash, but I don't know if he could have survived it.
Okay.
But there was a comfort that had it just been that, everything else was in place to help him and to be there literally within minutes of it happening.
Yeah.
But,
okay. Yeah. So then what happened?
Then we waited to see what was going to happen, because his girlfriend was charged with drunken vehicular manslaughter, intoxicated, whatever that word is. That lasted for, I think, a couple more months, and they ended up giving her deferred probation for 8 years. So she has to basically drive a vehicle with a breathalyzer in it for 8 years.
Okay. And how do you feel about that?
At first, it made me really angry, and I was very spiteful. And it took me a long time to get to the point to understand that, what? My son made a bad decision, and she made a bad decision. And they were both drunk. They were both inebriated. They weren't thinking straight. So neither one of them, in reality, would have done what they did had they not been drinking. And in that retrospect, I couldn't hold her accountable if I didn't hold him. So I had to just let it go.
Wow. Did that take you a while though to let that go? Like, how long do you think that was?
It took me probably about a year and a half. It
Okay,
took me a long time to work through it. It took me a long time to come to grips with all of the facts of the case, and it took me a long time to digest it. And people ask me now, well, how do you talk about it like that? And I'm like, well, the grief part of it's what happened to me. The factual part of it is what happened that night. Those are the things that I can't change.
Right.
That's the reality that I can't manipulate or warp or anything like that.
Right.
It just is what it is. And so I had to come to terms with the reality of it and the facts of it, and just understand that I can't change that. And
That's a good
then I
point.
could work on. Well, and then I could work on what was wrong with me, or how I felt, or how my kids were doing, or,
Right.
But it was a long, drawn out process of learning, and just
I bet.
going through stuff,
Right.
I mean, in some ways I felt very, very cheated, because here I had prayed him through 5 years of the Marine Corps and all the things that he did on special forces or whatever. And then I got him home for a whopping 6-7 months, and then he was gone. And it was like, really?
Right.
You
Right.
know, it seemed very,
Right.
very unsafe.
So then how did you work through your own grief, or what were some of the things that, you found that kind of helped you through as you look back on it?
My grandbaby helped a lot.
That,
It was very odd because the night that he passed away, she was very quiet. She hardly ever made a sound. And then she started talking, and she would just kind of talk randomly, like looking into space, you know.
yeah.
And my daughter asked her one time, she said, "Are you talking to Uncle Dustin?" And she smiled real big. And that was just kind of what we hung on to, is that he was still with us,
Mm-hmm.
that he didn't really go anywhere. And we've kept that with us. Like, I know it's just who he was, you know?
Right.
Family was everything to him. And he's always around. He's always with one of my kids somewhere, taking care of somebody, because that was just his nature. But a lot of it was just learning to really, really, really have faith, and learning what kind of grief I wanted to go through, because I had a very good friend whose daughter passed away in a violent wreck the December before my son passed away. And it derailed her life hard. And it really affected their entire family and everything, because it derailed her so hard. And I remember thinking, I can't do that. You know, I've got
Right.
a little boy that's 10 years old, and I've got all this other stuff going on, and a daughter with a grandbaby. And, you know, I
Yes.
can't do that. And so I chose to just not go down that road, and to figure out how I was going to walk down this road. And it
Yeah.
didn't make it easy. It didn't make it easy, but I serve in my church a lot, and that helped. I
Things
kept
were you doing beside, like, was it beside your calling? Like your,
yeah. I was the young women's president at the time in my church, and we had girls camp, or no, we didn't have girls camp that year. We went to Nauvoo, and I cooked for the stake whenever we go places and do youth conferences and things. And so we went to Nauvoo that year, and we cooked for the youth and just kept busy. But serving was my kind of the balm to my soul, because if I was serving someone, I didn't think about me, and I didn't
right.
think about what I lost. And I had a lot of people in between then and now who have had people pass away. And so it was that service, I think, that helped me more than anything. Being able to pray for them, being able to take them a meal, text them and say, "Hey, how you doing?" You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thinking of someone else. Because it's easy to get caught up thinking about ourselves and our sadness and the sorrow that we're experiencing. Okay, let me ask you a question, and this might be a little bit
Okay.
unrelated, but was this the same year that all of your stuff got stolen out of your trailer?
No, it was
Okay.
last year.
My
That was
goodness.
last year.
Okay. One of my friends, I don't know if it was the one that set us up or her sister that told me about that, but that's still very, really unfortunate.
It was hard. It was
So
really
tell
hard.
on that just a little bit, just if you
So
want.
we were going back to Nauvoo last year, and I was cooking. Me, my husband, and my youngest son were in the truck. We stopped over in Kansas City.
Mile stomping grounds. Woohoo!
We had a U-Haul on, and it was loaded with 140 pounds of frozen brisket. We had coolers full of stuff, all the stuff we were going to cook with. And we were there for about an hour and 45 minutes, and somebody stole it.
What did they
And
steal? The entire rig, right? Everything.
they stole all of it.
Everything in it.
The truck, the trailer, everything, it was gone. And we got up the next morning, and I made my phone call to the guy that I work with, and I texted him and said, "Hey, just wanted to let you know our truck and trailer got stolen. Not sure what we want to do from here, but we're gonna have to figure something out." And at that point, I didn't know what I was gonna do. I was just I felt naked, because I'd been just robbed. And
Right. And all
he
the
he called
preparations.
Yeah, it was a lot. We were picking up food in Kansas City, Missouri to take to Nauvoo, but there was still a lot in there, like, that we had brought with us. And when my friend called, he said, "Okay, so what do you guys want to do? We'll send you home. We'll fly you out, whatever you want." I just kind of thought to myself, I don't know why the devil's working so hard to keep me from being there, but game on, dude, because now I'm coming. Like,
Yeah.
now I'm going to be there. And so we rented a U-Haul van, went to Restaurant Depot and loaded up with food and went up to Nauvoo and did our thing. I had to make meals until Thursday afternoon was my last meal that we had to do. And we did that. They turned us loose to go tour Nauvoo and hang out and do whatever. And 30 minutes after, my daughter called and had found our truck on a Facebook page.
Wow.
Yeah. She found it on a Facebook page because the thieves that stole our truck tried to steal another guy's truck that looked like it, and he was at home eating lunch and ran them off.
Oh,
But
okay.
he posted a picture of her truck and said, "If this is your truck, it's sitting at such and such address." And Kaylee was on that Facebook page and she found it.
Isn't that just incredible? Wow.
Because we literally left, got it stolen, and then when we came back to Kansas City, Missouri, we picked it up and drove back home.
My goodness. Well, okay. Okay. So back to Dustin and you. Grief does not have to have any timeline or anything. So we just want to make that clear. There is no, I know for me, I heard, well, if you're not feeling better in 6 months, then we probably need to, do something about that. I heard 3 months actually, now that I think about it, and then 2 years. But honestly, it's good. I think it's just good for people to hear the variety of timelines that people feel like it took them to get from the worst of it to a place where you feel like you can smile and see the light again and like that you're in a better place. So when was that? And what do you like? Do you have anything specific? I don't know, that when you look back, you kind of remember like, I'm doing better. I don't know. Like, tell me what that process was.
I have a lot of things that, I don't know, I guess they filled me up. I had a lot of people praying for me. And that's one thing that if you want to help someone going through something and you don't know how, pray for them. Because at my very darkest and hardest part of my grief, I couldn't pray. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't vocalize anything because it just hurt too much. It hurt to breathe. It hurt to open my eyeballs. It hurt to have a thought go through my brain. Like, everything hurt. But those people sustained me and my family through that time. So biggest takeaway is always follow promptings, especially if someone's going through a process like this, because you might very well be their voice in the moment where they can't say anything. And they need that. And they don't know they need that.
Right.
They don't know. But people serving me and letting people serve me, I'm not someone who does that. I'm the one that does the serving. But
Right.
learning to let people have the blessing of serving me and understanding that it's their job to do that, and it's their gift and it's their blessing, not mine.
Exactly.
And that was very humbling to learn, is that I needed to step back and not try to do everything by myself. And I needed to let people help me through the process. I needed to let them do what they felt like they should do or they needed to do, or just talk to me, even though I didn't want to talk. And that was one of the biggest things that I learned through this, is that it wasn't about me, all of it. Some of it was about other people. And
I love that you're talking about that, Toni, because that's something that I'm learning doing this podcast, is that lots of you guys and me are saying that, because it is hard, especially if you're the one used to being the one serving. It's so hard to allow that and allow other people to receive blessings, because if we don't, we're taking that away from them. But it can be so hard to let that guard down and allow people to step in, because ultimately they really want to. They do. And we think,
They
oh, we're
do.
putting them out, or, it's a burden. I don't want to be a burden. I think people really search for a way they can help. And if we let them serve, I mean, they leave feeling so much better. And I think for the most part, we do too. It's a win-win.
We do. I think so, but I mean, it's the hardest part of that is that you don't want anyone to see you in that situation.
So
You
true.
don't want anyone to see you when you're broken. And it's really hard to let people just walk in your life and know that you're that devastated and you're that broken. But at the same time, the thing that I learned is that, you know what? They were broken with me. They were broken for me. And they really wanted to walk the miles with me if I would just let them.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's one huge takeaway. And I try very hard now to, when people ask me, well, what can I do for you? I try to stop and think, well, what can you do for me?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but as far as like the dark and the ugly and the bitterness of grief, for me, it depends on the day. You know? I
Okay.
mean, even today, some days I just can't wake up and function.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And I had to come to terms with that, is that sometimes I just can't.
Right.
And sometimes I can do wonderful and I can, you know, go do great things. I
Right.
love being around the people who love my son. I love being around the people who knew him. And I try very hard to involve people in conversations about him, about when he was young or things that they did. And I don't want people to feel weird about talking about him. I think that's one of the stigmas that come with grief. They're like, oh, how are you doing? But don't mention, don't talk about the person that passed away, and it's
Right.
like, no,
Right.
ask me about him,
Right. Yep.
but let's have a conversation about it.
Right.
That's one of the things, is it's just having people who did know him and loved him, who weren't afraid to talk about him, and who just kept him real, and talking to my kids about him. Honestly, we have a lot of weird jokes about him because he was the oldest.
Mhm.
And so my kids like to make a lot of good jokes because, he's not here anymore and he can't do things.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean, in that regard, I mean, he's not an off-topic subject. He's
Good.
still very much our
I
family.
love that. Yes. Exactly. Yep.
But
So what are some other things that you like to write about it? Talk to me. Tell us a little bit about that. Your writing.
I started writing poetry when I was 14, and it's one of those things that I just do. I don't really think about. It's just things that come to me, but it's my deepest, darkest private outlet.
Right.
And when the morning after Dustin passed away, I wrote a poem, and then I didn't write another poem for 5 years.
Wow.
And I didn't write a whole lot for 5 years. And normally I write a lot because that's kind of my therapy. And so it's been a challenge, but I think the thing that people don't understand about grief, at least for me, is that 90% of my struggle is all internal. You don't see it. People would ask me, are you okay? Sure, I'm okay. I'm here. I showed up. I'm doing
Right.
what I'm
Right.
supposed to. But on the inside, no, I'm like a big bowl of jello. Any minute now, I'm going to lose it.
Right.
You guys just have no idea. But that's kind of the hard thing, is, you get in the trenches of, making it through or making it go or doing this or doing that. And sometimes I wouldn't let myself grieve. And so then when the dam did burst, then it was really ugly
Right.
and really bad.
Right.
And not having the ability to write about it hurt a lot. But then again, I didn't really have the words to put together, if that makes sense.
Absolutely does. Yes.
So it's just one of those things that's really hard. I mean, I can read the poem that I wrote the morning after. My son also wrote poetry.
Oh, did he?
And he did. He also stole my poetry and took it with him in his binder when he was deployed.
Oh,
He
that's
did,
cute.
and I couldn't find it. Yeah,
And then
I couldn't find it.
he told you later, or what? How did you find out?
When he got out of the Marine Corps, he brought all of his stuff home, and he was going through his binder, and I was like, excuse me, like, I've been looking for this, and he was like, what? I just kept it with me.
That's
I was
cute.
like,
That's so
thank
cute.
you.
Isn't it?
Not really feeling it there, dude, but okay, here it is. But this is what I wrote. I remember what time it was. I don't know why, but it was 8:30 in the morning after he passed away. And it says, if I could bring you here with me to walk across eternity, to see me here with no more tears, to see me here with no more fears, to know that I shed no more tears, to see this peace that I now know, to see in me Heavenly Father's glow. I know it's hard for you still there, and the sorrow that is brought will not disappear. But if you could see me, then you would know. I am not lost, I'm only home. Please know always of my love, and my presence you will feel from above. Know that I walk with you, and I watch you pray. Ever your guardian I will remain, because some things never change.
That's so beautiful, Toni. Thank you for sharing that. That, especially right after it happened, like how you mustered up those words, because you were still out of town at that point, right? Or were
We
you
didn't get
coming
to
back
come home. No, we didn't get to come home until we made it home Saturday. He passed away on Wednesday, and we made it home Saturday.
Wednesday? And what year was that?
2019.
18. Okay. Wow. That's beautiful. Really beautiful. So have you put that anywhere, like on his headstone or or anything?
It's on my wall, and it was the poem that we put in his, I don't know what you call it, the little thing at the funeral.
Yeah, like the funeral program, I guess, or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the word that we put in there. But
Fascinating, beautiful.
I just took it as it was kind of what he wanted me to know.
Yeah. That's so beautiful.
But one thing is that he had a lot of things that haunted him from the Marine Corps, and he didn't have a lot of peace, which is one reason why he drank. And that was the one thing that I grabbed onto, was that I wouldn't trade my sorrow for his peace. Even if it meant him not being here, I would not give up his ability to have peace and to know that, I would walk through this and I would make it somehow or another. I would make it through this, but I wanted him to have his peace.
Wow. That's beautiful. So tell me this, and I ask everybody this. Is there anything that somebody said, did, or offered to you during your really just your hardest days that you look back on and have never forgotten and just felt like it was a source of strength or, just a help to you? Can you think of anything like that?
The best thing that someone ever told me was that it was just okay where I was, that it was okay to be there, that it didn't matter how long it took me to get out of there or how ugly it got, it was okay. And that kind of gave me permission to, every time that I was going through a hard day or anything from then on, I would think, but it's okay. It's okay that I'm here right now. Doesn't mean I'm going to unpack and live here, but I'm okay.
I love that. I love that. And I don't know who that person was. Good on them for just giving you that allowance, I guess. Sometimes there's this, I think grief makes people very uncomfortable and it's still taboo. They kind of just want to steer away from it and ignore it or avoid it. Other people's grief is what I'm saying. Yes, our grief can be very uncomfortable and all of those things, but some people just don't know what to do with it for other people. And I think that sometimes say nothing is great and sometimes better than some things that people say. But to just tell you that it's okay, that's wonderful.
Yeah. It was just kind of a permission that I didn't know I needed,
Yeah,
that
exactly.
it was okay for me to be where I am, and nobody needed to worry about where I was, because that's where I needed to be. And the other thing is I would have people, like friends from church and things like that. They would just come sit by me. They didn't say anything. They would just sit with me.
Like at
And that
church?
was at church, or like if we had some kind of event or something, they would just come sit with me and not
Yeah.
say anything. And it was the most peaceful support I ever had, because they didn't say anything and they didn't bring it up, and we didn't have to talk about the elephant in the room. They were just
Right.
there.
Yep.
And that's all I needed. I just needed to know that somebody was just there.
Yep.
So
You're not alone.
that's yeah. I think going through grief, you asked me if as a mother I felt like I got more attention. I think in some ways you do,
More
but
attention than
fortunately,
your husband.
yeah. I mean,
Okay.
honestly, I don't think so, because I asked him and he said no, because everybody always asked about the family. It wasn't ever, I mean, it was like, how are you doing? How is your family doing? It was always us connected as a cohesive group in a unit. But I mean, I see that. I see that a lot. Like when my mom passed away, everybody really worried about me, but they didn't really say that much to my dad. And always thought that was weird, because I'm
Wow.
like, that was his wife of 31 years, you know?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe you should ask him how he's doing, you know?
Yep. Yes.
But I think that goes back to what you said, though. People don't know what to say, people don't know what to do. And for me, it's just remember who they are. They're not their grief. They're not the person that passed away. They are who they were before it happened. Just remember who they are and ask them how they're doing. Ask how their day is going. Don't
Right.
always bring up, how are you doing? Are you okay?
Right.
I mean, we've got to build those, right?
Yes. And that's a fine line, because there are some times where, we think, yes, I want to talk about it and I want people not to forget about my child or my whoever that we're speaking of. But in your case
Yeah.
and my case, our child, we don't want people to forget that. But it's not something we want to talk about every single time we're in the same room together. Like there's like a right place and a right time. And sometimes people don't know that, and we can't really blame them for that. It's like more on us how we take people and what they say, and the silly full things that are said sometimes, and not be offended by them.
Yeah. No, it's a very real thing. Like, and, but it depends too on what kind of day you're having, whether or not those conversations are okay, or whether something said casually ends up being something that you think about all day. I mean,
Yeah, it's
that's
true.
the nature of the beast, is you don't know, and
Right.
I think being just acknowledging the fact that you have the grief and you carry the grief can help you be more forgiving of the people who are trying to help, who really don't know. It's not that they're trying to be insensitive or, whatever, but sometimes it comes across that way, but it's because of where we are. It's not because of their intention.
It's
And I
true.
think
Yeah.
perspective has been a word that's haunted me for the past 5 years. It really has.
Talk about
And
that a
that's
little
one
bit.
I've learned, that there's an eternal perspective, there's a physical perspective, there's a spiritual perspective, and there's an emotional perspective. And it's really hard, especially when you're going through grief, to get all of those to line up and focus on one thing, or to not put some kind of a rose-colored glass on to where you see everything coming at you in one way or another. That's one thing that I've worked very hard at through my grief, is to find the perspective that I want to be at the end of the day, how I want to see everything, and how I want people to understand where I am by how they receive me. And it's not easy, but I think when you choose to do things like that, it gives you a goal and it gives you a way to get out of your grief so that you're not just drowning in it.
Right. Yes. That's a great, I like that. Just that view and bringing that up perspective, because that makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure that, a lot of people can resonate, that resonates with them. So, okay. Anything else? Like, how do you feel your relationship with the Savior is now after you look back?
I look back, and so Dustin was in the Marine Corps. When he was gone, he was gone for about 2.5 years. We didn't really see him much, maybe at Christmas, if we were lucky. And looking back now, 2016 is when his last appointment was. And he moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. And he made it for his sister's graduation. That was her one promise. When he graduated from the MRCD, it was in between her birthday and my second son's birthday. And they said, we want to go see Dustin graduate for our birthday. And she told him that day, she said, okay, I made yours, so you have to make mine. And he got released from being back there and was supposed to be moving to San Diego. And he drove 23 hours straight through to be here for her graduation.
Oh my goodness.
And that's one of the sweetest memories that I have. And then he showed up the weekend she got married. We didn't know she was getting married. The picture that I sent you, he showed up and was asleep in our front yard, mistook us.
Oh,
He
my
showed up the
goodness.
day that my son Zane found out that he graduated high school. He got all of his credits. He was there that day. He was there for so many little things. Like looking backwards, that you really wouldn't think was like that big of a deal until now. And because of those things, I know that God was giving us every little tiny thing that he possibly could. Every memory, every moment that he could spare, he gave to us. And because of that, my faith is way stronger. My relationship stronger. I don't hold a grudge. I know for a fact it wasn't God's fault. I know a lot of people that do, and I feel for them because that's the last thing Heavenly Father would ever want for any of his children. But at the same time, people make choices that affect our lives, and we can't change that. And that's why I look at facts. I'm like, okay, well, this is what I can't change. But I will not blame Heavenly Father for that. I will not lay that at his feet. And I know it's hard for some people. And I know it's really hard. When we were going through the sentencing phase and things like that, it was really, really hard because I didn't want to be nice. And I didn't want to learn anything at the time. I was just angry and bitter and hurt. And slowly but surely, everything just kind of unwound. And I know for a fact how many miles I've been carried because I just couldn't do it on my own.
Right.
And I know how far my family's been carried. Those are things that make me eternally grateful. And that's where I am now. Is I want to live my life to make my son happy. I want to live my life to make Heavenly Father happy and my Savior happy. So now I have 3 people to make happy.
And I hope you want to be happy.
I am. When I'm doing the things I'm supposed to do, I am, because I'm at peace. And if I'm at peace, then I know I'm doing the right thing. And that's the gift that comes. There is a peace that comes with grief, if you can find it, that's different than any other peace.
It's true.
And it is hard to find. It is hard. There's a peace you just don't find any other. It's hard fought and it's hard won.
That's true. And it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
It is.
So you were going to leave us with something. What are you going to leave us with?
The last poem that I wrote.
Okay.
The last poem that I wrote just a few weeks ago. And that is the poem about where I am now.
Okay.
And it's called One Ageless Night. And one ageless night the sun arose, and with no grandeur did it pose. It was simple and shining bright as it woke with dawn from the darkest night. While sunshine rays broke through the dark, finding the land barren and stark, a quiet so loud and no sound being made. How will I ever survive this day? How I want to hold on to the lonely dark cold, hiding from the warm sun's glow. The winds of grief have shattered my soul, scattering my life like flecks of gold. Like glitter in the wind it whips around, landing and dancing, but no home has it found. How then will I rebuild this piece by tiny piece? Will I ever have it together? Will I ever have peace? What I would give to walk away from such pain, what I would give to feel normal again, to not carry this sorrow so dark and so deep, to dream sweet dreams again when I sleep. My tears have run out, I can no longer cry. My throat it still hurts, and it burns when I try. I fought the good fight, I've survived this day. Tomorrow I will find my strength to stay. Each tomorrow has come, some harder than others, some graced with sweet memories that don't seem to bother. Days into weeks and weeks into years, my heart still does miss you, but the sorrow is still. On day that it stirs, I sit and I weep. I remember and love you, no matter my will. These things will still be here for me to do. Some days I just need to sit down with you. With love in our memories and hope, not despair, I've reached the peace of knowing you're not here. It's okay, for I hold you in the depths of my soul, in sunshine and goodness, no shadows to know. You are mine now and always, have always been, and I walk with you daily till I see you again.
That is just, oh my goodness. All of your heart and soul. I love that, Toni. That's beautiful. Beautiful. And I hope that that can help somebody else. It's just beautiful. Admire you so much.
Me too. But one thing I did want to say is that I have a favorite quote, and it says, I love people who walk through the fires of hell, carrying buckets of water to those who are still within the flames. And when I found that, that was a huge help to me, because I thought, if I'm going to go through this, I can carry the water. I can carry the buckets. And so when you asked me to do this podcast, that's what I thought of. I thought, this is carrying a bucket. This is how you help someone else in their own personal misery.
Like you said, paying it forward earlier before we started recording. I love that. And I appreciate it so much that you were willing to do this, because it is still pretty recent, and I just, and you were honest about where you are today. And I'm grateful for that. I think it just makes you real and authentic, and just so happy to have heard your story, and just about your beautiful family and how close you guys remain, and still being able to, talk about Dustin and, remember the fun memories. And he seems like an amazing man.
He was a very good man. He was, and the year he passed away, Christmas was his favorite thing. And so I bought everybody Dustin gifts. And so we do that every year. Everybody gets a Dusty.
I love that. That is a great idea.
And I didn't want, when my mom passed away, I didn't want to do things. I didn't want to be a part of things because they were hard, because I missed her. So when Dustin passed away, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to just leave him or forget him or pretend that wasn't his chair or pretend that wasn't his stockings.
Right.
So
yeah. Keeping him, keeping his memory alive at his favorite holiday. I love
just
that.
keeping him a part of the family.
Yeah.
Because his littlest brother, who was 10 at the time, it was like, what are we going to teach him? How are we going to keep this alive for him to remember all these things? Right. And so that's what we did. We just decided we would keep him here any way we could.
Right. I love that. Such a great idea. Well, I think we'll leave with that unless you have anything else.
No, I thank you for doing what you're doing. I do, because grief is a hard topic and a lot of people don't like to talk about it or want to talk about it.
True.
And I appreciate your sincere desire to bring people peace if they can.
Well,
And that's
thank you. It's my pleasure to be able to, I'm just grateful that it's working out and that, we can share in that together, all of us. So thank you for that. Hey listeners, thank you for tuning in today. I hope you felt encouraged and gained some insight. If you want to hear more inspiring stories, make sure to subscribe and don't forget to check out the website at pieces2peace.net. If you or someone you know has a story you'd like to share, send an email to heathersteven@pieces2peace.net. Until next time, keep moving forward.